Chapter 3. Yo. "You're safe now," Nancy assured the distraught girl. The young detective put an arm around the stranger's waist, and George held her hand. "Yes, you're perfectly safe now," George reiterated. "We have a car down below. Would you like to sit in it and rest a while?" The girl heaved a great sigh. "That won't be necessary. I must return to camp." She pointed in the distance toward the water. "I'm a counselor down there. Perhaps I shouldn't have gone wandering so far by myself." "We'll drive you back," Nancy offered. "A few minutes ago you were warning us not to go up the mountain." "Why?" "Because there's a real sorcerer up there, a horrible-looking creature. I suppose he's a man, but awfully scary in appearance. He wears a green costume that makes him blend into the foliage. There's a funny light glowing about him. That's not so bad. But his face, it has a weird greenish hue." "What about his hair?" Nancy asked. She was intrigued by the description of this creature. "I don't remember seeing any. I guess his costume had a hood." The girl sighed. "To tell the truth, I was so frightened I nearly froze in my tracks. He didn't come any closer, but pointed a finger down the mountainside and said, 'Go! Do not return, or I will change your bones into stone so you will never walk again.'" The girl had been trembling with fear, but suddenly she shook off the mood. "What a ninny I am," she chided herself. "Of course there are no such thing as sorcerers. Don't ever tell my little girl campers that I thought one frightened me. By the way, my name is Karen Jones. What are yours?" Nancy and George introduced themselves and said they were glad Karen was over her scare. Nevertheless, they were sure that she had seen some man with a greenish face and wearing a green suit. No doubt he had turned a flashlight on himself. "Did you see anything else on the mountain?" Nancy asked Karen. "Nothing special. You mean like a hut or a tent or a lean-to?" "No, I didn't see anything like that. But tell me, why do you suppose that man is pulling such a stunt?" George smiled. "I'd say to keep people away from himself and whatever he's doing in the forest." The three girls started walking toward the car. Karen's eyes grew large. "Do you think something illegal is going on up in the mountain?" "Could be," George replied. Karen sighed again. "At college, I'm a botany major. I was up in the forest hunting for luminescent mushrooms on tree stumps. You know, the kind that glow." "I've heard of them," Nancy told her, "but I've never seen any." "This coming semester, I'm specializing in fungi," Karen explained, "and I'm supposed to hunt for something luminescent this summer. But I wouldn't go up that mountain again for $1,000,000. "I don't blame you," George said. "But if you do, better take a crowd with you and not your young campers either." By this time, the three had reached the car. Bess and Aunt Eloise were just returning from the waterfront and reported that the cry for help had not come from there. "It was on the mountain," Nancy explained, then introduced Karen to the others. George gave a quick resume of the counselor's story. "Oh, how horrible!" Bess exclaimed. They all got into the car and headed for Karen's camp. On the way, she said, "One day I met a boy. He's really a young man, in Cooperstown, who told me there was a sorcerer on the mountain. He works at the main boat dock, and people around there laugh at him and say he's full of tall tales, and that this was just another one of them. But now I believe him." Nancy asked who the boy was. "His name is Johann Bradley, but everybody calls him Yo," Karen explained. "I got the impression that he's older than he looks, and is kind of a town character." By this time, they had reached Karen's camp, and she got out of the car. "I can't thank you girls enough. If you ever learn the mystery of the Green Man, let me know." "I will," Nancy replied as she locked the door and drove off. During the rest of the ride to town, the conversation centered around the strange person in the woods. Who was he? Why was he there? Was he a danger to the community? Bess spoke up. "I thought Mirror Bay Bide-A-Wee was going to be as calm as the water here, and in less than 2 days we've bumped into 2 mysteries." Aunt Eloise laughed, "Which I'm sure pleases Nancy very much." Nancy grinned. "I'll be happier after I solve them. I'm going to start by interviewing the boy Yo. She drove immediately back to the Cooperstown main boat dock. Before taking the sailboat, she asked the man at the booth if Yo were around. He pointed to the end of the dock, where a round-faced, pudgy young man sat twirling a toothpick in his fingers. As Nancy came closer, she could hear Lo singing. His voice was melodious and dreamy. When Nancy approached, Yo looked up, but did not arise. "Are you Yo?" she asked. "That's me," the young man replied. "Something I can do for you?" Nancy sat down beside him. "Yo," she began, "a girl at camp along the lake told me you've seen a man with a strange green face and wearing a green suit up on the mountain. He had a light around him." "That's right, but he didn't scare me," Yo bragged, grinning. "Do you know who the man is or anything about him?" "Nothing except he's a sorcerer," Yo answered. "As you get near him, he'll tell you awful things, like what he said to me. 'Jump in the lake, boy, and don't come up.'" "Nice person," Nancy commented. "Can you tell me anything else about him? Does he live on the mountain?" "Search me. I know these mountains pretty well, and I've never seen a shack around that area where he rushed at me. Maybe he comes from a distance." "But why would he always appear in that particular spot?" Nancy asked. "I don't know." Abruptly, Yo changed the subject. "You and your friends are newcomers here, aren't you? I saw you at the bus stop yesterday. Did you get taken too by those phony people?" "No," Nancy told him. "That was a crime. By the way, the girl involved is supposed to resemble me. Have you seen her around?" "Yep, lots of times." Nancy was surprised to hear this. "Do you mean she lives here?" Yo said he did not know, but he had often seen her walk up East Lake Road and take off through the forest. Nancy wondered if there might be some connection between her and the Green Man. Was he the girl's partner in the vacation racket? Perhaps a gang of them was hiding on the mountain. She said nothing of this to Yo, and after a few minutes more conversation, she finally stood up. "What's your name?" Yo asked. "And where are you staying?" Nancy told him, thinking if she did not, he would find out anyway through the rental record of the sailboat. She also mentioned her aunt and the other girls who were with her. "Yo, the police are looking for that girl who resembles me. If you see her around again, you had better tell them." "Okay, I will," he promised. "Now you got me interested. I wonder who she is." Yo got up and accompanied Nancy back to the booth where Aunt Eloise was making arrangements about the sailboat. Hearing this, Yo asked Nancy, "Do you know how to sail?" "Oh, yes," she replied. The pudgy young man smiled to himself. Nancy wondered what he was thinking about, but he gave no explanation. Instead, he said, "I got a dandy little boat with an outboard motor. I'll stop by your place sometime and show it to you." He was introduced to Miss Drew, Bess, and George. Then, smiling, Yo walked off. "So he's the tall story boy," George remarked. Bess said, "Perhaps they're not tall stories. Maybe they're true. I don't think Karen was making up what she told us." Bess gave a great sigh and said in a dramatic voice, "That old mountain is spooky." The others laughed, then discussed who would take the sailboat up to Mirror Bay Bide-A-Wee. It was finally decided that Nancy and George would. Bess and Aunt Eloise would return by car. As the two girls set off, Nancy kept thinking about the funny smile on Yo's face. Did the lake and the bay have tricky winds? Would she and George be likely to run into some kind of trouble? Or did Yo know something more about the mountain he was not telling?